Hi, folks. Welcome back. This is Dr. Kat Schreier. This is another one of our interview series on Water Goes Virtual. And of course, every year, all the big water associations and the small water associations like to get together for their annual meetings. Essential part of being part of those organizations. And of course, right now, we're not doing big meetings, so they're all going online. And today, I get to talk with one of my favorite organizations. I'm joined today by Dan Yates from the Groundwater Protection Council. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Welcome, Kat.
Fantastic. And my relationship with this organization goes back a long way. If you guys don't know, way back before I got into WaterCitizen media and WaterCitizen education, I was doing groundwater, and I was doing especially something called aquifer storage recovery, which is now like a big thing, right?
Right, absolutely.
Everybody's talking about ASR. But for the longest time, it was very hard to get those projects up and running, not because of the science or the technology, but because of the regulatory side. And
right.
There's something called at the EPA called the underground injection control. Dan, why don't you tell us in very simple terms, because we've got all sorts of folks, what is the underground injection control all about?
So, and it's interesting. Before we were called the Groundwater Protection, the UIC program.
I hit pause by mistake. Back it up.
Oh, okay.
Tell me again.
Yep.
So tell it. Where did you start?
So before we were called the Groundwater Protection Council, and before I was here, the organization was actually called the Underground Injection Control Practices Council. So we were created to help bring together all of the state UIC programs, and that's a program that EPA runs under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it's a very broad program. So it's Class 2 wells are the ones people are probably most familiar with. That's saltwater disposal in the oil and gas industry. But then there's also Class 3 wells, which is solution mining. So really, it's any time we've got a well that's going downhole that could potentially have any impact on groundwater. And so there's a whole regulatory program to make sure that those are constructed and maintained properly. And EPA has the regulatory authority, but then some states have gotten primacy for various parts of the program. And so we work with both EPA and all those state primacy programs to share technology and innovation, share information about changes to regulatory schemes, share success stories, so we can kind of all keep on the cutting edge. And it's one of those regulatory programs that not a lot of people know a lot about, but it's very important and important to environmental protection.
Yeah. And it's fine with water. There's always, you can get very specialized in water, and you get lots of different types of experts, and there's lots of different associations that bring those together. And I happen to have a swag box here. We'll talk about your swag box in a minute from an organization called Tribe. And if you're doing underground injection control for your state, you're probably not spending most of your time with other people who are doing underground injection control.
Right. Yeah. In fact, if you're working for a state agency and you're working on underground injection, you may be the only person, or you may be one of a team of 2 or 3, and likely it's not your full-time job. So you have, you're in an environmental agency and you probably have other duties. Most of the people working in the program are geologists. There's, I'm sure, a few engineers and such. So it's a science-based program, which is, again, something that we really promote. It's like you've got to understand geology to understand injection to be able to protect the environment.
Right. And you also have to understand law and regulation. And a lot of
absolutely.
Water is just STEM people. It's just the science and technology, engineering, mathematics, and everything. But there's a lot of understanding how laws are made, how rules are passed, how promulgated. Get to use promulgated, right?
And especially the implementation piece. So, you get the law written, you get the rules written, but the implementation is the part that I find very interesting and where our organization really kind of tries to dig in.
Yeah. And one of the differences also in groundwater is, and first of all, for a lot of people who are in big cities, you've got big reservoirs, big rivers and everything, people are used to thinking of these very large scale projects and very large agencies headed by the state engineer, the city engineer, or whatever. Now, groundwater is a huge component of the water supply. For what percent of the U.S. do you think is that gets their drinking water from groundwater right now?
Last I saw a stat, it was somewhere around 55%. So it's pretty big. And then I think that's counting direct use of groundwater. So people who are specifically getting groundwater, but even some of the large public water supply systems have groundwater components. But of course, we're often really focused on the rural areas and the individual wells for the people who have those private water supplies that can be very vulnerable to all different kinds of things.
Absolutely, it'd be an individual homeowner, or maybe a small community that's all
right.
Well,
or a rural water district, or those kinds of small groups. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really becomes very important to understand the science, the technology, the laws, the regulations, but be able to explain it for someone who doesn't do this stuff every day.
Right. Yeah. It gets really complicated, especially if you're not dealing with it every day. And even people like me who deal with it every day from a top level, there's so many of the intricacies that even I don't understand. So
yeah, and it's very down to earth. We're dealing with salt of the earth kind of folks and everything.
Absolutely.
So I really love it. And you also mentioned in terms of the large cities, and this was something I had worked on the very first ASR project in the state of North Carolina, in the eastern coastal plain. The eastern 1/3 of the state, was flat. It doesn't have big reservoirs. Most of that area, like most of the coastal plain on the eastern United States, uses groundwater, and all these regulatory issues came up, and so the American Water Works Association asked me to do a national study of every place that was using ASR and all the different regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were finding was, like you said, a lot of big cities have surface water supplies, but there may be an area of their service area that, like in Arizona, the Central Arizona project doesn't get that far, so they're on groundwater. Or they may use it for emergency supplies. We're seeing all these forest fires. We see floods in Iowa. We see hurricanes in South Carolina, where they have this underground water stored for protection, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So to get it away from that idea that we're just using wells for disposal, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you mentioned, the ASR program, which to me is really an interesting program, because we're talking about pulling some source of water, could be stormwater, could be other sources of water during high flow, and injecting those below into an aquifer, so then we can recover that water at a time of the year where there's more drought or that sort of thing. And so it really kind of pulls together the water quality people from the state agencies, the water resources people, and so that's there's always been a lot of overlap between kind of those two different groups of people, but on something like aquifer storage and recovery, they have to work together. States have to work together on permitting processes. Here in Oklahoma, you've got to get permits from 2 different agencies to be able to do an ASR project. And so for organizations like ours, there's a real benefit there, because it's causing this interagency communication that maybe wasn't happening before. And so we actually see a lot of opportunity there, but there's just also a lot of challenges when you're trying to get multiple environmental programs to kind of work together on something.
Yeah, and that's what we were seeing. A lot is people would end up, running from agency to agency to agency.
Right.
And so, I would do these sort of collaborative meetings, like the one we did in Arizona, where we brought together all the different agencies with City of Phoenix. And in that case, actually, we were also using reused water. So
right.
That's a whole other layer there, and that's also become very hot right now. The big EPA reuse plan.
Absolutely, and we're very involved with that too.
Very nice. Is that going to be coming up at the conference next week?
It will, for sure. So 2 things that we're really highlighting at this conference are aquifer storage and recovery, and then also produced water reuse. And when I say produced water, I'm talking about from the oil and gas industry produced water. And so both of those are included in the water reuse action plan. GWPC is the lead for the aquifer storage and recovery, and then we're one of the co-leads on produced water. So we've got sessions on both of those going to be at our annual forum.
And I'm actually pulling up your agenda right now. And actually,
Great.
that's the other side I wanted to mention is that, yes, you've got the drinking water side, but because so much of the activity involving aquifer injection is related to oil and gas or related to mining, often these UIC people are not in the water agency, they're over in the oil and gas agency, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that kind of makes the Groundwater Protection Council a little bit different from some of our sister state agency water groups and a lot of the water groups at large, is that because the UIC program is split among the oil and gas agencies and other environmental protection agencies in the states, we really get a pretty broad range of people with a lot of different kind of daily interests and what they're working on. But what really kind of pulls it all together is, like I said earlier, it's a lot of geologists, a lot of engineers, a lot of knowledge about downhole mechanics and hydrology and groundwater hydrology. And so there's a lot of kind of correlation between the two sides, but we're a little unique in that we kind of straddle those two different spaces.
Yeah, and and that also led to the other big effort that we worked on together, which is recognizing that because that relationship between water and energy,
yes,
there's a lot of work with National Energy Labs. And,
absolutely.
Was it 20 years ago at this point? 15, I don't know. It was a while ago now, but
it's been a couple of years at least.
We've a few gray hairs ago. There, the Department of Energy is really a security agency. That's a great way of, it's not so much about supporting the oil and gas industry, it is about supporting national security. And the labs, part of their job is to find threats to national security for energy and power down the line. And years ago, they said, we really need to look at water. We need to look at climate change. We need to look at drought. We need to look at, coastal areas going underwater, sea level rise.
Yeah.
And how did that fall in the lap of the Groundwater Protection Council to be in charge of the Water Energy Nexus Symposium?
Well, that's a great question. We've had a really good relationship with the Fossil Energy Division at the Department of Energy and with NETL, the National Energy Technology Lab, for a number of years. We've received some grant support from them to help state agencies with data management, which again is a big part of this security issue that you're talking about, is really just having the right data. And then, of course, oil and gas state agencies aren't just dealing with oil and gas regulations. They've got a lot of water regulations and groundwater protection. And so just through that relationship that we had with all of these state agencies, both on the water side and on the oil and gas regulatory side, and our existing relationship with DOE, we end up really just kind of being like the perfect little place to pull together those two water and energy symposiums. And so they happened, they were part of our annual forum for a couple of years. We're still kind of addressing a lot of those same issues. So doing another water energy symposium down the road is something that we'll probably do. But I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You've got to have water to produce energy in the United States, and you need to have energy for water in the United States, for treatment, for the production of water. And so there's just so many things that get tied together within that water energy nexus. So it was just a very natural place for us to focus.
Yeah. And as I recall, it was a year that there was a lot going on with climate change and renewables, and oil and gas was not quite the most popular place in Congress.
Sure.
There's money over in renewables, right? And so suddenly, and because we had already worked together on the ASR stuff, I actually ended up working with the Groundwater Protection Council on developing that program. And I saw Mike Hightower is on your agenda. He's still keeping life interesting. We love Mike. He's amazing.
Oh yeah, Mike's heading up the New Mexico Produced Water Consortium, of which we're participating in that, and also partnering with the consortium on some educational stuff. We did a webinar in July on produced water.
Yeah. Mike is awesome. And
He's great.
so basically, Mike had gone to all the labs and they pulled together a group to talk about where water and energy shows up in nuclear, where it shows up in different types of, in solar and wind and unconventional oil and gas and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it was a real cross-cutting effort.
Yeah. So to get all that together in one event, it was really cool, right? So we got this, we had the big plenary session, and then we broke everyone out in little groups and got them all back together, and what's the future and everything. It had that nice storyline and everything. And then that actually led to a shift at DOE, which before said, we're not a water agency. We don't do water. Go talk to EPA. Go talk to Corps of Engineers. Go talk to Interior. We don't do water. And then after that session, suddenly in the quadrennial report, they're talking about water. And now, of course, EPA is front and center with their water energy challenge. And I think that really highlights just how important events like the one that you guys have next week are, because it's when we get everyone together on the same page, understanding the outs and the background in a way that people can understand.
The cross-pollination
happens. Yeah. So, we got so excited talking about our history, we forgot to talk about what's next week. Tell us about what's happening next week.
Well, we're really excited. So this is going to be our first ever virtual annual forum. So the annual forum is our annual member meeting and our annual kind of technical and policy showcase. It's usually a 2 or 3 day event, and because we're a national organization, it moves all around the country. It was supposed to be in Salt Lake City this year. We've pushed Salt Lake City back a year, so fingers crossed you'll be able to join us in Salt Lake City. But this will be the first time where we've done an entire conference virtually. And we've already got over 200 people registered and a few more kind of trickling in. And that's about where we usually are for our annual meeting. On the really large side, we've had maybe 350 a couple of times, but 200 to 250 is about where we usually are. So we're really happy to have that many participants. And we've tried to scale down the amount of content a little bit just because of the challenge of people joining in from multiple time zones. And if you've come to our conferences before, we pack in a lot of content in 2 or 3 days. And so we're just kind of going. We're all pretty tired by the end. So for this forum, we've really just tried to highlight what are the 5 or 6 kind of big topics that we really need to cover, that we really need to pull people together on. And so there's a source water session that we're doing that really is trying to highlight some key national aspects of things going on in source water protection right now and funding that's available. We're having a Class 1 session just to focus on the Class 1 underground injection control program, which has a lot of correlation with the Class 6 program, which is carbon capture and storage. So we're focused on that. We've got 2 produced water sessions. That was
huge for a long time. Everyone's talking about carbon sequestration and carbon capture.
Absolutely. And that is cranking back up again. There's a lot of movement with a lot of national associations and with EPA and the Department of Energy on carbon capture. So it's something that we're going to be involved in for the long haul. You and I have already talked about aquifer storage and recovery. That was kind of starting to be a cool thing when you and I were first working together a few years ago, and now mostly because of drought and some other issues, aquifer storage and recovery is just kind of on our radar screen again. And several states have updated their regulations to make ASR more likely. And then we have a national work group, which is our ASR MAR work group. MAR's Managed Aquifer Recharge. And so
that includes the surface recharge.
Correct. Yes. And so we've got a work group. Mary Music on our staff is in charge of that. And then, of course, our general session, always we try to get a good update from the Department of Energy and from EPA. And our incoming president, John Kenning from Montana, will kick that off. That's a pre-recorded event. Some of our events are live. Most of the breakout sessions are live, but a couple of the kind of big general sessions are going to be pre-recorded. But we'll still be manning the comments and the Q&A part of that. And then the big challenge for us really is that I think the #1 reason people come to the Groundwater Protection Council meetings is to collaborate with your peers. So like we said earlier, if you're working in the UIC program in a given state, you may be the only one or the one of 2 or 3 people that know anything about the UIC program whatsoever. And so coming to our meeting lets you kind of interact with your peers in other states that are doing the same thing. And so what we're going to try to do is infuse some kind of community boards and some little side meetings and stuff to get people to kind of do that camaraderie piece. And then one fun thing that we're doing that's a little kind of outside the box for us, being geologists and scientists and engineers, is we're going to create a groundwater anthem. So we've hired a band group that does this. They'll host a Zoom meeting. Everyone who participates will get to help come up with lyrics and decide what kind of song is this going to be. Is it going to be pop or rock or bluegrass or whatever? And so that'll be in place of our reception. We met with the band last week. It's going to be fun.
And one of the things, and this is so cool, people were really, doing very technical work sometimes, or just put in a box. You're just technical, right? But some of the most creative people I know come out of these very technical fields, and it kind of lets their other half of their brain just fly, and they're into art, they're into poetry, they're into music. It's this idea of doing this groundwater anthem. I think that's just fabulous.
Yeah, and we've always tried to foster an environment where during technical sessions and work group meetings and these kinds of things, we want opposite points of view and we want conversation, and it's okay if we disagree on things, right? Like that's how we get work done and how we move things in the regulatory and environmental environment. But the other thing we've tried to foster is that once 5:30 hits and we're all together, let's put down our individual thought processes and then let's just be people and hang out and get to know each other. Right. Yeah. Bring your dukes down. So that's what we're going to try to do with that too, is like, let's all just take a break and have a little fun. And you're right. I think, people who work in heavily science oriented fields, and especially in regulatory fields, that's a lot of creative thinking that you have to do. And so we're just going to try to channel that into a groundwater anthem. I don't think it's going to get released on Spotify or hit the charts or anything, but it should be a lot of fun.
I'd love to see this on YouTube. And actually, speaking of YouTube, hang on one second. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when we did this Big Water Energy Nexus thing, we brought in some other perspectives. We brought in the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology woman who is doing water and energy in places that don't, the poorest of the poor. We brought in Don Johnson from Miami Vice, who's an investor in some water technology, and we had this downlink from the space station. You can still find this on YouTube. Look up NASA and GWPC, I think, and you'll find this is Nicole Stott and her, who's with a nonprofit. Friend of mine was involved with this. It was Mana Energy. That's what it was called.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
The Engineers Without Borders at the Johnson Space Center. So all of their members literally were rocket scientists.
Right.
They wanted to figure out how to do this in Africa and in some really poor communities, of how do you generate energy, how do you create carbon credits and create some revenue streams for these schools and run the pumps and for their water and everything, and it was just really, and then she took this picture of the solar panels and of the earth, and you could see all the oceans, and then they talked about how they deal with water and energy in a very small space, which is the space station. So
yeah, it provided a really interesting and different perspective for our meeting that year to have, like we're all down here arguing about little bits and pieces, and then we go to our reception and have this downlink from the space station. It was really cool.
Yeah. And and I really liked, your group, you had the Environmental Defense Fund.
Yes.
And you've got all these big energy folks, and it provides a safe space to bring people together. And
yes,
and
absolutely.
One of the things I think is really critical about these opportunities happening now with the virtual space is when people have limited budgets, and especially for your folks. And that was the third thing we did together with the big ASR forum, that we had to put this forum of national academies at the end of a GWPC meeting because it was so hard to get approval for
Right.
travel. But
Yep.
to do it as just one more day, you know, so when people can't travel because they work for state agencies, to be able to do virtual symposiums, it provides more opportunities to go to more different, be part of different organizations.
Absolutely. I think we're going to see a sea change here now that especially some of the smaller associations like GWPC, now that we've delved into all this virtual stuff and learned how to do it, it just means it's that much more acceptable for people. And one of the big benefits this year is that, and we actually promoted this out to our members as enticement, but basically we offered our state agency members, you know, buy 4 registrations to get 1 free. And when you add the cost of all of those 5 total registrations together, it's about the same cost of sending 1 person on a plane to a hotel to register for a meeting, you know? And so it's just a really powerful that ultimately we were able to kind of dip down into these agencies and get people that would never be able to get travel approval to come to Salt Lake City for a conference. So that part's really exciting. Like, I miss right now not being able to be face to face with my members, because it's a huge part of what we do, and we do a lot of good work there. But at the same time, creating these opportunities where we can get more people involved virtually, it's also a positive.
And really, I mean, you and I are face to face right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We can see each other, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of what's happened over the last 6 months with COVID is that people realize that, yes, there are things that you can do online. And actually, it was that third thing that we did together. This National Academy of Sciences had done their study on ASR that I was part of. And we wanted to get the results out to people who really needed it, especially those regular, you know, where basically the punchline of this whole 4-year study was, we understand the technology, we understand the science.
Right.
It was regular, you know, the policy, planning, permitting, public perception. So we had a 1-day packed to the gills forum where we had everybody had 5 minutes to speak.
Right.
Boom,
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom. Right? But there was this group out in the Central Valley of California, second largest aquifer in the United States, you know, the breadbasket, you know, lots of agriculture. They were looking at doing an ASR project. And they finally said, you know, it's going to cost us more to fly everyone out there, be away from the office, have people themselves, than paying for a live stream, which this is way back before Zoom.
Right.
So it was another $10,000.
Cutting edge at the time.
But what happened was, and we started at 8 in the morning. So there were people out in California that had bagels and coffee. You know, I think it was Montgomery Watson Harza or something was serving, hosting these little viewing parties.
Right.
So they could start at 5 a.m. And they're sending in their questions, and we're looking at the camera. And we're saying, we have a question from, you know, Chris in Sacramento about this. Dan, you worked on this. Can you answer that question? You know, and when people knew that we were actually responding to them, boom, all the phone lines, you know, everything just started. All the people are coming in from, you know, Idaho and New Jersey and Mississippi, people who otherwise would not have been able to come.
It was like a cascade. Yeah, I remember.
Yes.
It's exciting.
I think we're gonna, you know, and you know, like I said, now anyone can put together a Zoom call. It's understanding how to engage with people, how to build in those community experiences. Are people going to be able to get on camera and see each other during those social hours?
Yeah, so we're using Whova is the conference platform, but once a session gets kicked off, it's just in Zoom. So it's you know, the Whova app will send you out to Zoom, you know, and so it'll be just exactly what we're all used to, and we'll be encouraging people to the extent they're comfortable turning on their cameras. That's kind of one of the big challenges. We just finished up the State Water Reuse Summit, which was 4 Thursdays in a row. And one of our challenges was just convincing people, like, it's okay, turn on your camera. If you were at a meeting, we would see you, right? It's not any scarier than sitting in a meeting room, you know? So yes, people will be able to ask questions, interact with the speakers. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll be using the community board for speakers to be able to answer additional questions. People can just start their own side meetings. So if some interesting conversations happens in a session and you want to follow that up with 2 or 3 people, you can just create a little side meeting and invite them, and then that'll open up a little Zoom as well. So again, we're just trying to, all the ways we can think of while we're sitting at our own desks, how can we interact like we would at a conference? How can we replace those hallway conversations or that conversation you have at breakfast because you just happen to see the person? And so we'll see how it goes, but I'm very optimistic.
You know, I'm really, you guys always do such a great job with your members, and you really take care of your community. You know, it's not just let's get the big players and the big sponsors a chance to get on stage, or the big cities a chance to, you know, have their say. It's that, you know, and the folks at Society of Floodplain Managers, they talked about the same, that one of their major whys was about creating community, and you guys are fantastic at doing that. And just to clarify, is if so people, we're going to get this out as soon as we can, as soon as we hang up.
Thank you.
So people can register and actually join. I didn't have my phone up with the little Hoover app, but so Hoover basically is one of those little, it's kind of like a little private Facebooky kind of thing where everyone gets your profile and you can have conversations and you can have groups and you can set up events if you want to follow up with someone. How long will people can get on that now, and then they'll be able to continue for how long after the event?
I believe it's 6 months. I think everything stays live in the app for 6 months. But then after, kind of during that period, we'll be downloading a lot of the important stuff, videos and documents, and, you know, the kind of shared documents, maybe not the community boards, but any, you know, papers people post. We'll download all that eventually and put it on our own website. But for people who are registered for the event, they'll have access to Hoover for 6 months after the event. So you don't have to download all those documents and stuff. You can go back and rewatch a video, or let's say the Produce Water session is at the same time as the AR session. You got to pick which one. Well, we're recording both. So pick one and take part in that one, and then a couple weeks later, come back and log in again and watch the recorded version of the sessions that you missed, or rewatch the one that you were sitting in because you got a phone call during it and you missed something, you know. So that's,
the kids came in.
Exactly. And that's something you don't get with a live event. Yeah. And this Hoover app, we haven't used it. Yeah, we haven't used it before, but it existed before all this virtual stuff. It's like any meeting you go to nowadays, there is some sort of conference app. So all we've done is take that basic concept, or Hoover has done this, and then just put in kind of the video conferencing for the sessions as well. So people are already logging in. People are already talking to each other on the community boards. I've been private messaging a few of the attendees. The exhibitors have already posted videos. And so there's already content out there now that people can go kind of before the conference. And then Monday, we'll have a pre-recorded orientation that's for everybody, how to use the app and how things function. And then we're also going to have a kind of a new attendee orientation, which is self-selected. It's anybody who wants to join in. So if it's your first time at one of our events and you want to know more about what we do, that's going to be short, little 30-minute thing, me and a couple of board members.
To know the terms that people throw around, like UIC.
Exactly.
You know, what are all these terms and everything? And that way you can just jump right in there and just have fun. And it's a great group of folks. And, you know, I want to point out, you know, when it comes to choosing between sessions, I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot of in terms of one of the advantages of these online sessions is, you know, especially when you get to the big conferences where you're like, you know, you got to walk from one end of the conference to the other. If you want to change meetings, you just push a button.
Right.
I've been doing this one.
You don't have to walk across the hall.
Yeah. I mean, we've got this one. There's a group that started doing this. Is Joint Ventures Insider Circle. They do this thing called Collaborate, and it's all about, you know, finding people that you want to work with for the rest of the year, joint venture partners, cross affiliates, whatever. And you know, so usually you would go into a room and there'd be all these different tables and they're different color flags and different colored pins, and people spend half the time looking to figure out where they are. Right. And here you have someone at controls who just sends people off into the little breakout rooms, right? So, and it sounds like you guys can actually choose to go into a breakout room yourself. Do you just ask for a breakout?
That's right. So one thing that you can do that we're not doing is you can actually, like, in a session, turn that into 2 breakouts. We did that with the state summit. So we've got some breakout meetings already scheduled, but anybody inside the app can create their own breakout meeting. So if you look through the attendee list and you notice, like, oh, I'm really interested in class 6, and I see these 3 people that I know who are involved in this program, and I got some questions for them, you can just set up a little meeting space, send them an invitation, and then just kind of host your own little Zoom meeting with just the people you've invited, you know? So just exactly what you would do. You'd grab a couple of people and walk down the hall and find a corner in the conference center where you can sit at a table. Well, we're just trying to create that same atmosphere virtually.
That's so cool. You know, for people like you guys and myself who are into, collaborative water planning policy, that's our gig. It's not supposed to be about spending a lot of time figuring out, ordering the catering or,
right,
room block that sometimes we end up spending a lot of time doing. And now
we do logistics. Yeah.
Now we can just focus
on content and conversations.
Content and outcomes. What are the objectives? What are the things that aren't working now that with the right people sitting around the table, the right conversations, that we can help build those cooperative experiences, we can move things forward in water in a way that we can't do if people can't get to the meeting. Exactly.
Identifying challenges and then creating action plans to address those challenges together.
Nice. I love it. Okay, you and I, we're going to work together more on this, I'm sure.
Great.
Folks, thank you so much for joining us for these Water Goes Virtual. Watch all of, we've got AWWA, Water Reuse, Floodplain Managers, Floodplain Management Association. We got a few more coming up. So next week, the highlight is on Groundwater Protection Council. Please do sign up. And of course, if you can't make it next week, you can still sign up and still have access to everything, and even have access to the Hoover app, so you can actually talk to people that you say, hey, I wasn't there live, but I watched your session. Can we get together, right?
Exactly. All of those things are possible. Absolutely.
All good things are possible. I love it. Creating possibilities, that's what we're all about. Dan Yates, I know you got lots to do. Probably your Hoover list.
Right. It's crunch day.
We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. And folks, thank you for watching. And have a great day and enjoy all these virtual conferences. Get out there and let's do water.
Get out there. Thanks for having me.